Welcome to the 19th Century Charitable Association in Oak Park, where it is our vision to be a dynamic cultural center for community learning. I'm Phyllis Wendell, a member of the Science Program Committee. 30 programs have been scheduled for this season's enrichment series as part of our mission to strengthen our community through learning, giving, and sharing our landmark building. The title of today's program is The Meaning of Darkness, How Light at Night Has Transformed Our World. I'm pleased to introduce Ken Walczak, our presenter. Ken is the Senior Manager of Far Horizons, a scientific research and engineering program at the Adler Planetarium, engaging students, volunteers, and public in hands-on participatory research projects. He has co-authored many papers on light pollution research. Please welcome Mr. Ken Walczak.
Thank you so much. Thanks for the wonderful welcome, and Phyllis, thank you for filling me in so much about the history and the work you guys do here and the interest you have in so many subjects. I think it's really inspiring. So I'm going to take you on a little journey today, and that little journey is about night and why you should think about it more and think about how we're changing it. I don't want this to be a downer. We're going to leave you with some really interesting ways that you can actually change your world. But let's start out with the meaning of darkness. Now, I want to give your eyes a little test. Now, one thing you're going to be seeing on the screen, for example, is we're going to bring down the lights in a sense. And what you might notice is slowly things are changing. But your eyes are adapting. And our eyes are amazing tools. We actually have 8 orders of magnitude of sensitivity. Think about it. You can walk into sunlit outdoors and be able to see everything. And you can even walk at night by just the light of stars. That is an amazing range. And our eyes are a tool that developed as we evolved to be able to not only live in the day, but also adapt to the night. But something's kind of changed. Because we think of light like a thing. We think of light as like, oh, we have our environment and we want to do things at night. So even since hunter-gatherer societies, when we had fireplaces or fires built at night and we'd gather around them for heat and protection, it would also be a chance to share stories and to, be communal. So you always think of like light. Oh, let's put this thing into the environment to give us more of what we want in, like expanding our capabilities on this earth. But night is actually a thing as well. And we kind of take that for granted. We don't think about it as a part of our world sometimes. So here, hopefully you can see, I don't know if you can see this. I have some challenging darkness in my presentation, so hopefully it comes across. This is the world as it's been for 4 billion years, and this is how it is now. This is actually seen from space. It's a model of the Earth built up from the light we emit at night. That first image you saw was actually just a black circle over a starlit sky. The reason why is because for nearly 4 billion years, every life, every species, everything on Earth that's living was born and lived in a cycle of day, night, day, night, day, night. Darkness at night, brightness during the day. And in fact, 70% of all mammals are nocturnal. We're not one of those. We're actually diurnal. We actually are not a nocturnal species. But we've kind of used this ability to change our nighttime world to be able to change it for our purposes. What is that going to mean? So here's a starry sky. I shot this photograph in, I think this was in New Mexico. And it's what a starry sky should look like. We've kind of replaced that now with stars of a different kind of nature, light at night of a different kind of nature. This was actually taken from a mission we flew over Indianapolis, Indiana, on a high-altitude balloon, which flew up to the stratosphere, and it was designed and built with students that I work with at the Adler Planetarium that look down and capture what is coming up, what is the light we're creating at night, and what does it do to our environment. Now, I'm not a Luxite, which is my word for a person like a Luddite for light. It's not that I'm saying, we don't need any light at night. I'm just saying we can do it better. So I'm a board member of Dark Sky International, which is used to be called IDA, if you're familiar with it, International Dark Sky Association. And this is one of the people that work at the IDA, or at Dark Sky International. She took this picture in Utah of what a night sky should look like. This is an image courtesy of Betty Maya Foote, and this is me ruining it. I applied a Chicago night sky to the natural environment. This is what we live with every day, and maybe some of us don't have a chance to look up and really contemplate how much we've altered this nighttime world that's inherent to not only our biology, but the ecology of the entire world. So one of the things that we've done at the Adler Planetarium is designed an instrument that looks up at the night sky and takes a picture of the entire night sky, like a fisheye lens you might be familiar with. And we can take these little cameras we've designed and built anywhere in the world. And in fact, we have taken them a lot of places around the world. And in this case, this is from my rooftop in Chicago on the left. And on the right is one of my coworkers went up to Yellowknife up in the Northwest Territories of Canada with the same camera, so that we can actually do an apples-to-apples comparison. Because sometimes, well, actually, you know what, before I go ahead, I'm going to ask a question of you all. Raise your hand if you've actually seen the Milky Way with your own eyes. Yep. Now, okay, I'm going to say something. I talk at the Adler Planetarium all the time to public audiences, and when I ask that question, my general rule of thumb is if you're under the age of 40, you're not going to raise your hand. So, because we've gotten to such a place in our world because of the way we use light at night that we've changed it so much, and it's so generational that sometimes it's not noticed until it's too late. So let's compare these two views of looking up at the night sky from Chicago and the Yukon, or Northwest Territories. As the sun sets in the Northwest Territories, you're like, oh, wait, that was daylight. And finally, the sun sets. There's a couple flashes of lights when they have their flashlights out. But now we're at nighttime in both environments. Nighttime, yes. That is nighttime in Chicago compared to nighttime in an environment that is actually pristine when it comes to darkness. It's almost like daylight, isn't it? In fact, from a study was just actually released a few months ago this year that showed that light emissions, all the light we're shining up into the night sky, have increased almost 10% annually over the study period, which is about 12 years or so. Now that is amazing. That is faster than the increase of population. That is faster than almost any other thing that you can imagine when it comes to maybe a pollutant. And most people don't think of light as a pollutant, but I like to say that this is a researcher from England coined this phrase, which I love. He said, think when you hear light pollution, you're like, oh no, another pollution. But every kind of pollution we can think of, air, water, land, whatever, is actually really costly to fix. Light pollution is costly to maintain. It's actually as easy as switching a switch. 10% per year, by the way, means that a child born today in a sky that they could see 250 stars, and you should see about 4,000 in a perfect night sky. If they could see 250 stars today, by the time they turn 18, they'd only see 100. Just within their youth, it would change that much. So here's a map of the United States built on observed images from outer space, from a satellite, that calculates how much the glow in your night sky is for where you live. And so here's the continental United States. You can see the scale all the way from white, which is like Chicago, LA, New York, all the way to black, which is pristine night skies. Now, I'm going to take away since a lot of you raised your hand when I asked that question, I'm going to take away all the places that you can no longer see the Milky Way. That's what we got. Okay. Starting to lose something here. Well, the Milky Way is, I like to say that seeing the stars might not seem like of the most vital importance to our species or other species on Earth, but it is an incredible cultural experience. And it's also the canary in the coal mine. It's the thing that shows us that, woo, this is the fragile part that's going first. Now let's take away, remember I said that 70% of all mammal species are nocturnal, which means they need nighttime to survive. And where do they still survive? This is what's left of the night in the United States that is unaffected by light pollution. Imagine if this was your habitat. And, well, let's see, what does this mean in the real world about, like, let's say birds? The Cornell Lab of Ornithology is an amazing resource. They do some amazing work. And one of the things they've done is created this thing called Birdcast. You could actually go online and just type in birdcast.info, I think it is, and find this resource where you could take any night, you could do last night, for example, and it'll show you with weather radar how many birds are migrating at that time. In fact, 70% of all birds in North America are migratory. They migrate through the United States. And 80% of those do it at night. It conserves energy, it's much more efficient, it's easier to do for those birds. Now, what you're gonna see, I'm gonna play a video here, is you're gonna see live weather radar densities of birds. And you can see right now as we're starting, this isn't sunset yet, there's 54 million birds migrating at this one moment. And then as I play the video, you'll see a red line pass across the United States, and that's sunset. So let's see, and keep an eye not only on the quantity up in the map, but also keep an eye on that number down there. Now remember, this is from October 7th, so just a couple of weeks ago. So you see sunset swoops across. We're over 1 billion birds. In fact, at one point, it almost got to 1.2 billion birds were migrating at one time across the United States. And as sun rises, you see, obviously, it returns to where those birds are, like, resting. Now, these birds do that at night. And remember, I said for 4 billion years, there was no light at night. They navigate through stars. They navigate through, they use cues on the ground and up in the sky to be able to navigate all those distances. And what happens when we put artificial lights in their view? You might have heard a really sad story from a couple weeks ago. Yep, yeah. Have you guys, did you hear the story? Yeah, so at McCormick Place, which is right on the lakeshore, remember water is always one of those places that birds like to migrate through. Over 1,000 birds actually were fatally wounded, and a lot of those were traveling all the way from northern Canada and making their way to South America, and they ended in Chicago. Now, you know, one of the things that you might have thought about when, you know, the first thing that comes to mind, oh, I've heard about light pollution in animals, is baby sea turtles. They get disoriented when they see light off of the beach because, once again, I'm going to return to that pristine night sky. What would be the brightest thing in a nighttime environment when you're on the ocean? The moon, and the moon reflecting off of water. And the stars reflecting off of water, they sparkle. That attracts their attention. They know which way to navigate. When you put big bright lights the other direction, on the other side of the road from the beach, you know what happens. Now, this isn't just larger animals. This is a very important part of the entire cycle of our world ecology, I should say. This is a cluster of mayflies from a couple years ago out in Iowa. Someone posted this picture. Now, mayflies live as an adult and breed in only one day, in about 24 hours. And they have to do that. They're mostly in the water as nymphs and things like that, as food for many fish and many other kind of other animals up the food chain. And if in one time, just like the turtles are attracted to the wrong thing, bright, glimmering light, like you'd see reflecting off water, to attract mates. They're not going to be planting their eggs in the right place, and you start to disrupt an entire ecosystem. So now we know that there's a huge, huge sort of impact to the ecology of our Earth from many, many stressors. Light pollution is just one of them, but I just wanted to kind of point this out that we know that the more we disrupt our natural systems, the more there's going to be downstream effects. And it's not just animals. There's been, in fact, there's some studies being done right now on how light at night affects trees. And some researchers have actually found that when you light, for example, around trees, like urban environment has a lot of light, you might be able to see this little thing in the leaf budding and tree, the leaf color change are two of the things that tree researchers use to time how, find out how the timing of trees are pegged to natural cycles. And they found that almost 9 days of change in the way that the time that leaves bud, and as you see, like 6 days change. Now, it might not seem real significant, but just think if you're a species that nests in trees or feeds from the output of these trees, and suddenly everything's shifting to a different part of the season, it's going to also just think of all these things adding up. Well, now, all these mammals and animals that we're talking about are pretty interesting, pretty important to our world, but so are we. So how does light affect us? Now, one of the things that I like to point out, hey, I'll be honest, this is our bedroom. I live near Humboldt Park in Chicago, and we're on the second story, which is right in line with the streetlights. So fundamentally, we could save a lot on our electric bill by just using the outdoor lights to read by. We prefer not to. So fortunately, we have the advantage or the wherewithal or even the knowledge, by the way, we've bought blackout curtains. We put those blackout curtains down when we want to sleep. But it's like, okay, is this affecting us? Now, I'm not going to be too technical in all this stuff, but I did want to share a few interesting pieces of research. That this one is looking at the way that light at night affects sleep. And they actually found that, I wanted to point out a couple things about this. It not only affects sleep cycles, but it also disproportionately affects people of color and also lower income communities. And I'm going to get to that in a minute. There are also effects with obesity. So these are all of downstream effects with stress. Even some kinds of cancer, and prostate and breast cancer, have actually been correlated to, increase in those cancers, have been correlated to potentially brighter experiences of light at night. In a sense, never getting that natural cycle of light. This was, I showed our windows at night. Someone reached out to me. They live near a big parking lot in Chicago, and they said, hey, I think these lights are really annoying, but I don't think, I want to do something about it. I'll reach out to my alderman. And I said, well, one of the best things to actually make change is to grow consensus. Get your neighbors involved. And he's like, I don't think my neighbors are really that interested. I think I'm the only one. I went down at night, and it's a little hard to see, but these are all the houses that lined the street along that parking lot. And if you look closely, every single one of them has something, either shades, blackout curtains. One even has plastic bags taped to their window. All these people are in agreement. And he ended up getting the alderman to come out and make a change because he got his neighbors to say, I did notice that you're doing the same thing I'm doing. So it's something that we found, even with the students we work with at the Adler Planetarium, that they didn't even have a name for it. They might have noticed it, might have even thought about it, but didn't realize it was a thing, kind of like how night is a thing. Once you put a name to it, you can start saying, yeah, I can address this. I can actually do something about this. Now, as humans, we also look at our pocketbooks. I want to show you how, oh, it's a little cut off at the top. But I work with a researcher he's in Potsdam, which is right outside Berlin. And he shared this information with me, so I pulled the data for this. The Brandenburg area, which is the kind of like the county around Berlin, and Cook County have about the same population. And this is sort of like that image I showed you of the United States, where the brighter things were, the color range changed. We can actually, from space, add up how much energy is flying out into the sky. Now, if this was caused by street lights, well, it's lighting up space. It's not a space light. It's supposed to be a street light. So this is literally, you can count this all as wasted energy. So don't worry about the units. Just look at the number on the bottom. So it comes out to 1 million nanowatts per centimeter squared in Chicago, and 130,000 in the area around Berlin. These are all same scale, by the way, which means there's about 8 times more energy shooting up into space in Cook County than there is in a city. So it's not like it can't be done. In fact, the US alone, and this is only for commercial and municipal lighting, this is not industrial or residential or anything like that, expends 143 trillion watt hours of energy every year. Now, put that into context of the world. Remember we saw that globe glowing? The United States is not the only thing glowing. And this is 85 million tons of carbon emissions. All right, who knows what 85 million tons is? It's really hard. Big numbers, working in astronomy and stuff, it's always hard to like say, oh yeah, trillions, and you're like, okay, I don't know. Let's put that into context. 85 million tons of carbon emission is the equivalent of, there we go. Whoop. The equivalent of 13 Great Pyramids of Giza of mass, carbon into the atmosphere just from outdoor lighting, just in the United States, just in 1 year, just from municipal and commercial lighting. But we need light at night to keep us safe, right? This is one of the things that I do have a strong interest in, because I've always found like, yeah, you know what, we have an inherent fear of the dark. That is natural. But maybe we're going about it the wrong way. Maybe we're using light at night, if it's going to be for safety, to respond to our fear of dark, as opposed to respond to the actual thing we want to address. So, we'll put big bright lights on our, backyard or our, garages or in our streets, and you'll say like, there you go, now I can see everything, right? Does anybody see the creepy guy? Oh, there he is. Actually, it's not a creepy guy. It's one of my fellow members of Dark Sky Chicago. We just saw this opportunity to say, like, when you have light that's too bright in your eyes, remember I mentioned that thing where you have 8 orders of magnitude of sensitivity to our eyes? But guess what? It's only shifted to the brightest thing. So you can only see at one time a certain window, and that's going to shift to the brightest thing. So for example, I cannot identify any of you because I have a light in my eye. You can see me, but I can't see you. Think about that walking down a street. If you're the one under the light, you're the only one who can't see. So safety, huh? Okay. This is an image taken from the International Space Station. This is from 2015, looking down on Chicago. So we're like, but we need all that street light, at least, for example, to make sure we can walk down the street safely. Let's see if that works. Let's see if that's really how we solve a problem. This is Austin. Now, I picked this entire area of Austin because it's the same size as Oak Park. Oak Park, Austin. Do you notice a difference? Austin is 2.7 times brighter, almost 3 times brighter. It's emitting all that light up than Oak Park. Now, which is safer? This was the number of reported crimes in 2015 in those 2 neighborhoods. I find what happens is my theory, is that when people perceive a threat, people want more safety, and they're saying, We have crime in our neighborhood. Do something about it. If a politician says, we put all these streetlights on your street, see, you can see we did something. They didn't do anything. All they did was go back to that health thing where all the light was shining through people's windows. Does everybody in Austin have the wherewithal and maybe the ability or even the money to be able to put out blackout curtains in every single one of those windows? Probably not. Are we doing more harm than good? Are we actually solving the problem, or are we avoiding the problem? I'll let you decide. So, to understand our world with the light at night, now, like I said, I'm not going to make this talk too technical, but I do want to throw in one figure in a second. I want to show what we do. This is one of our undergrad interns. We designed a system that I mentioned. We fly up to the stratosphere, and here it is. We're launching it from Kankakee a couple years back. This is one of the missions we've done. So we launch experiments up to the stratosphere and high altitude balloons, and that image over on the right is one of the many of tens of thousands of images we collect from our missions, and we can use that to do some really interesting research. Which we recently published a paper that was looking at, now with the colors you're looking at here, are different kind of land use. Blue, for example, in this one is residential. Red is commercial. Yellow is industrial. And we can look at, all right, where is all this light coming from? If we're going to solve a problem, we need information to be able to find out how to best solve, instead of just guessing and saying, ooh, let's turn down the lights. That's probably not going to happen. And I want to point out a couple things about this. One is that on the right column is how much space each of those areas took. You can see that over half of the area in our analysis area was actually residential. We take a lot of land for residential. That's fine. We like space. That's great. Only 7% of the space was commercial. Stores, parking lots, things like that. But commercial actually emitted almost 3 times as much light as the space it took up, whereas residential was about 1/3 of the space it took up. Or I should say like 2/3 of the space it took up. So although you could think of it like in 2 different ways, if the entire world was a commercial parking lot, it would be really, really bright. But since we have so much space for residential, like houses and all that, it actually adds up to be the single most largest emitter of nighttime light in the area. This, by the way, this was everything from rural to suburban to downtown Indianapolis. This is where we did this analysis. It seems to hold, according to some other things from around our area as well. The proportions might be a little different. But I want to show a thing about the residential. Sometimes we take pride in saying, oh, look, we have all this technology, let's use it, as opposed to thinking through, what is it actually doing to our world? And I'm going to give you one example. So I was using some images, some data from a satellite. This red box, I'm going to use this one example of residential lighting gone amok. Keep your eye out for it. Now, you'll notice this red box is about 3 miles by about 2 miles or so. In that box I was like looking at that going, what is that bright thing? Sometimes it'll be like a football field during weekend, when school's playing or something like that. Sometimes, and I looked at, wait, what is the makeup? It looks like all houses. And in fact, these are every single residential house, plot of land. And this is, by the way, in Naperville. And there are 4,733 individual family homes, single-family homes in this area. This one home, that bright one you saw, is actually brighter than the 3,400 dimmest properties together. That one house literally emitted 12% of all the light in the night sky of all those 4,700 homes. One house. What are they doing? So we just happened to have one of our Dark Sky Chicago members happens to live in Naperville. I said, hey, Dana, can you go out there and see what's going on? So she went out there and said, oh, it's one of these. And then I was like, let's take some pictures at night, see what's really going on there. And Now, let's go back to those lessons we learned about ecology. If you're a bird that migrates at night, and maybe at the end of the night you want a respite and you want to bed down in a tree, this is not going to be the one you pick. In fact, they had lights on every single one of their trees, which is, in a sense, sterilizing it to nocturnal animals. It's a bad choice. And one of the things that we're trying to do at Dark Sky Chicago and Dark Sky International as well is to try to educate people, to say, like, is this beautiful? Is this necessary? Is this what we want? And does it have a harm? And when it all adds up, all that light we're shining up in the night sky, a lot of you raised your hand. No offense, but you're probably, I don't know, a couple of you might be under 40, I don't know. There was a lot of hands up. I raised my hand too. And what does that mean to all the people who don't raise their hands? All this light up at night is changing our world. Remember this map of where what's left of dark, pristine places? The yellow star is where we live. If you were born today or you're a teenager today living in the city and you say, I want to have the experience that you had when you raised your hand. The closest place actually is just in the very tip of the Upper Peninsula. It's over a 400-mile drive. It would be a many-night trip. If you don't have the means, the ability, or the money to be able to do that, you probably never have that experience. Well, we have a little bit of a hope. I was mentioning to some of you earlier, one of the things we've done at the Adler Planetarium, remember I mentioned those cameras we took? We designed that look at the entire sky and can quantify how much light is in a night sky. We worked with the forest preserves of Cook County for about 2 years, collecting data in and around Little Red Schoolhouse. This triangle kind of shape here is what we call the Palos Preserves. It's over a 7,000 acre, it's about a 7,000 acre protected, in fact, 2 years ago, we finally got a designation as the world's largest urban night sky place. Right in almost your backyard is a place that you can go to that has almost no light at night. Now think about this. It's not that you're going to see the Milky Way from horizon to horizon, but you'll stand there, walk through a beautiful forest at night, and never see a light, except for LaGrange Road. We're working on that. Let's put that into context. This is that area from satellite, and I'm going to put Chicago back in there. Oh, that's actually the world that we're protecting, that little triangle. And like I said, it was done with the help of a lot of our students at the Adler Planetarium to collect the data and to actually fill out all the application forms, which took, like I said, 2 years of work. And then we finally got that designation in 2021. Now, one of the things is the forest preserves are normally closed after dark, but we have we've been working real closely with them. We now offer more than 60 programs a year where you can actually go to the forest preserves at night and experience it. In fact, a month and a half ago, we had a public observing event, which was at night in the Forest Preserve. Anybody could have come, and we're going to try to do more of them. And we had over 300 people show up. It was great. We had a picnic and telescopes and music, and it was wonderful. As I was mentioning, it's not about seeing the Milky Way like we'd hope, but at least it's a place that give you one anecdote. We take some of our students that start with our program, our high school students. A lot of them are from the city of Chicago. They'll go and maybe live their entire lives in the city. And we'll take them to a dark sky place. So one time we went to a place near Champaign, which is a designated dark sky park. We've gone to in fact, last year we went to Indiana Dunes. And surprisingly, Indiana Dunes, if you get between the dunes where you don't have any of the glow of Chicago in your eyes, we actually saw the Milky Way. For some kids, it was the first time they've ever seen the Milky Way in their entire life. And then, I thought the funniest thing was, one of our students went back home, said, "Oh, Mom, guess what? We went to this place that didn't have any street lights, didn't have any lights at all." And she said, "Nope." Her mom said, "No, you're lying. You have to be lying. There's no such thing as a place with no lights." That was a generational message that was being, and it's like, there is, see, that's the thing about what we're trying to do and why we need more people to be aware of how important the night is and what we're doing to it, because we're losing that ability to say, like, oh no, the natural world can actually not have lights. So I said I'd leave you with something hopeful. And so Dark Sky International worked along with the Illuminating Engineering Society to come out with what are called the 5 principles of responsible outdoor lighting. And these are things that I want to give you as a message, because it's one of these things. Light pollution, once you see it, you can't unsee it. And we want to be able to change that. We want to be able to improve that. But like, how? How do you do that? So, first of all, think of every time you see a light at night, think about, do we need that? Why is it there? So is it useful? So a wall pack on your garage that just shines out like we saw in that earlier image where we blocked it with our hand, is it doing anything? Maybe, it could be done better. So here's a photograph from Humboldt Park in Chicago, where I live. And this is after the park closed. This is literally, it's not like a sports field. It's not even being used. And remember that thing I said about once you shine light in a tree at night, you're fundamentally sterilizing it for nocturnal animals? Look at those trees. Wait, do we really need that? Even if we just kept the small little warm ones, I think it'd still be fine. I don't think this light is useful. We could get rid of it. Now, the second thing is targeted. Is it actually shining where you want it? So go back to that wall pack on the side of that garage again. It's shining in the person's eyes. If you really wanted it shining down, it actually shows the garage door, and you could see, and then you could also see, because your eyes can adjust, you can actually see around it as well. It's helping you out. So in this case, I go back to my bedroom, where it's like, I don't think that's pointing at that's a street light. So why, it's not a bed light. And then I use this other example. There's the light is shining from downtown Chicago. You can see that there's a kind of a bluish glow. Bluish glow from Willis Tower. Okay, it's shining up on whenever there's an overcast night, I love it, because you can actually, it almost brings out all the bad lighting. But that other giant bright streak was the Salesforce headquarters was put in Chicago, and they thought, we're going to show the world. And they have this giant light on their logo on the top of the building that's literally shining up, illuminating the clouds. And luckily, within a week, now this is one of those stories of people being aware, because people actually live, kind of like how I do with the streetlight, live in a lot of expensive homes, or like condos, straight across the street from that Salesforce building, and it created an uproar. And they've now dimmed it and put it on timers, which gets me to the next thing, is low light levels. So that Salesforce light, for example, well, it was excessive. I mean, if it's lighting up the clouds that bright, it must be a lot of light. But also, could it be dimmer? I'm going to give one example here of using light levels that you don't need. Remember that thing about our eyes having an amazing dynamic range. So this, one of also fellow Dark Sky Chicago members sent us this picture, and I said, yeah, what does this have to do with light pollution? She goes, this is in St. Charles, and these people are taking a night hike. That's what I said. I said, no, it's not. It wasn't until I downloaded the image and looked closer, I'm like, oh my God, that is a night. And it's actually a place where heron even roost, but maybe not anymore. It's literally adjoins a juvenile detention center in St. Charles. And they felt like they needed to upgrade their lights. Now, I don't know what they're protecting, or are they protecting the people in the facility from herons? I don't know, because they've definitely are not protecting themselves from what they think they are. They're just using so much light that it's not actually a benefit at this point. I kind of touched on it earlier with the light from Salesforce advertisement, where they, because of public pushback, they said, you know what? All right, we'll turn them down or we'll turn them off after a certain hour. Technology these days is amazing. You've probably seen like those motion sensing lights that you could put like maybe on, in your backyard or something like that. Something like that, think about it. If the light is on 10 minutes, maybe 20 minutes of turning on and then turning off because of some motion every night, as opposed to 8 hours, you've just saved a lot of energy. You've saved a lot of light. And so you can actually have things on timers, or there's a lot of technology now that can solve this problem. This is at the Adler Planetarium. We have what's called the telescope terrace. You can see the little benches there. We just put that in a couple years ago, and now you can, at night, come out and observe. Well, that really wouldn't be very helpful for observing, but what was really wonderful is, although the lights on the terrace are controlled by us, the parking lot lights kind of behind those trees are not. But after talking to them, we were like, can we get the switch? So when we do an event, we can actually switch off the parking lot lights, and they're like, okay. And this is what it looks like once you do that. And you know what? I can still see the sidewalk. I can still walk. The telescope terrace, which by definition should be dark because we have telescopes there, is still approachable. There's small little lights. It's hard to see, but if you're there, you'd actually enjoy the environment. And the final thing is color. Now, have any of you ever gone to the hardware store and seen like, they'll say, bright white, or they'll say daylight, or warm white, warm light, some kind of indication on the color of the lights? That is very important because, and just give you, if you weren't familiar, there's a scale that we use in lighting to tell you how blue a light is, how much blue content, and it's called Kelvin. It's a scientific term it's called black body radiation. That's why stars are different colors, why the sun's kind of yellow-orangish, and why the star Sirius is bluish-white. It's because it's hotter. So the higher the Kelvin number, like Sirius is, I think, about 5,000 K, than the sun, which is cooler and gives off a yellower light. You want the yellower light. You don't want blue light in the light you're using. And the reason all wraps up into everything I've just told you about at the beginning, about ecology and health, because blue is a trigger for our body to say it's daylight. So you could actually have a dim blue light on at night, fall asleep, and then wake up the next morning, and your body never thought it was nighttime. The blue frequency of light, you've probably heard of rods and cones in your eyes, right? Right? Each one has its purpose. The rods see in dim light, the cones see color in daylight. There's actually a third sensor. In fact, the Nobel Prize in, I think, 2017 was given to researchers who discovered that we have a third sensor in our eye that just, all it does, it's not a visual sensor, it's sort of like a light meter. And that one is really, really sensitive to blue light. Because blue light, normally in the natural world, usually only happens at day, a blue sky. At night, there's not enough intensity of light to say it's blue. So that's the way our bodies know it's day and night. So if you screw in blue light bulbs in outdoors or indoors and things like that, ones that are higher than 3,000 K. So if you're at the department store or the hardware store and you see a light that says 4,000 K, and you're like, don't do it. You want to go for 3,000 K or below, because the lower that number, the less blue light you have. And this is the range from 2,000 all the way up to 6,000 K Kelvin. And those two blue arrows I have there, that's the natural range of daylight. From sunset to bright daylight, it's in that range. So if you have a light bulb that's from those blue arrows or anything in between, your body and your eyes and every other creature thinks it's daylight. So here are some bad examples. I think you guys could probably recognize them now, of light being used wrong, of lights literally being lit on fire from so many bugs lighting them. And you could probably identify it now, hopefully. And this isn't the only way to do things. There are amazing examples of people using designers and lighting engineers and even light fixtures that you can get, which enhance the nighttime environment and actually protect the night. I want to point out a couple examples. The lower left is the city of Flagstaff, Arizona, where it's a little hard to see on our slide right now, but believe me, you can actually see from downtown Flagstaff, which is a city of 100,000 people, you can actually see the Milky Way from downtown. The upper left one is really interesting. That's in Rotterdam. It's a city park in Rotterdam, and you see the kind of glowing sparkles along the path? Those are actually bioluminescent plants. No energy required. So, going back to some of Betty Maya's wonderful photographs, hopefully, if we do the right things and we kind of approach our world in a way that respects the night, and we are thoughtful and do a little work to pull out the best technology we can and to think about those 5 principles, you know, maybe we can get back to this. So, thank you. Oh, by the way, thank you. And if anybody's interested, if you use the QR code thing where you pull your camera out, and you might have to get a little closer, I don't know. I'll keep this up. You can actually follow a link that takes you to Dark Sky Chicago. We formed a chapter of Dark Sky International here in Chicago, and we're doing some amazing work. And we could always use more people who are interested and want to help. So, and do we do questions now, or? Great. We could, yeah, I might want to pull the lights. Now, what do we learn? What do you think? These are actually pretty warm lights. I like this. I like this. Go for it.
I was looking at the paper the other day, and there was a headline. I got to follow up on for the page and read the article. It was about how McCormick Place is addressing the problem of all the birds. What are they going to do, and do you think that it will help?
Well, this is the funny part of that story. David Willard, who is retired now, but he also still volunteers at the Field Museum, is the one that he and some other folks at Bird Collision Network in Chicago were the ones that the source of that story. David Willard has been studying McCormick Place for decades. And in fact, 2 years ago, he published a paper that literally showed that they would collect birds every morning around McCormick Place. This is the one, the old building that's right along the lakeshore, and count how many birds there were, and then also would record what the state of the windows was. So he was able to find that when the lights were all the way on, half on, or dimmed halfway or off, he can count how many birds actually died every night. And he found that all they had to do was dim the lights 50%, and that would cut the amount of bird deaths by 75%. So they know the answer. What happened on that night was an influx of a certain weather pattern that made the birds fly lower, and also they were having an event that night. But we think that that's not an excuse. So hopefully there are some solutions where they could actually do some treatments on the windows to reduce, so birds can actually recognize that it's not a pass-through and things like that. So there are solutions. The question is whether they're going to implement them, and I know there's an online petition right now, if you search, it has well over 10,000 signatures now, about them addressing this. And I know that they're aware of it and they're very conscious of it, because the day after that happened, if you went to the McCormick Place website, you get a pop-up. You couldn't even go to their website until you saw their apology. So they know that they need to do something about it. Need some pressure, though.
Let's see, it's on. Miss Barb.
This may be a dumb question, but how does daylight savings time fit in this whole picture?
That's interesting. Now, think of it like this. If you didn't have a clock on you, would you know the difference between daylight savings time and regular time? But you know what's interesting? So it doesn't change the amount of day and night we have. It just changes when we wake up and when we go to sleep. And you're right that here's the problem. At our latitude, your exposure to daylight is going to be limited. For example, in the shortest days of the year, you're still going to have the least amount of daylight in your entire life, because you're going to wake up, it's going to be dark, and you go to sleep, it's going to be dark, right? We only get that much light. So shifting the time doesn't really make it that much. And then obviously in the summer, you have longer nights. So there actually have been some studies done, which is kind of interesting. So I would say, like, the biological effect, it probably doesn't have too much effect. I can't say that for certain, but it probably doesn't have too much effect, because our bodies are still, if you wake up in the dark, or you wake up maybe and it's getting a little bright, you're still sort of experiencing the same day-night cycle. But there were some studies that were done to look at the health effects of, like, areas, like, for example, you know how the Eastern and Central time zone goes right through Indiana there? And they actually looked at health outcomes in that hour, because when they'd have the sunset the latest, or no, earliest in their time, and then when it shifted, it actually made the most dramatic difference. And they actually found negative health outcomes when there's daylight savings time, because it shifted so dramatically for people like right on the eastern or the western side of a time zone. So that's kind of a slightly different thing, but it does show the effect of our day-night synchronization when it's disrupted. Yeah.
How does air pollution, smog, and ozone fit in?
All right. How does air pollution, smog, and ozone fit in? So when there's particulates in the sky, they refract, they actually diffuse light. So the satellite images you're seeing of the world, the United States, Chicago, those are light literally just shining straight up into a satellite. You'd never see that unless there's an atmosphere. So now, we did an experiment earlier this year. We just presented at a conference taking those all-sky images around the Palos Preserves to see if we could find the actual sources of what's glowing in the night sky. It happened to be this summer, you probably remember, there were a lot of nights where there was a lot of smoke in the sky from the Canadian wildfires. And we measured, we can actually measure, it was, let's say 145, it's a logarithmic scale, it's about 4 times brighter. The sky was 4 times brighter because of that smoke in the sky, because it becomes like a reflector of all the light would normally go up into the atmosphere. So yes, the more pristine your night skies, the less air pollution there is in it, the less you're going to have what's called sky glow that's blotting out the stars. Yeah. It's magnifying the problem. Yeah.
Is the Hubble telescope affected by light pollution from the Earth?
Yeah, that's a funny question. Because it's like, yeah, you'd think like, well, all that light's going up. No, in the short answer. Mainly because it's at its back. The Hubble's looking up to space, the Earth's behind it. If it was looking toward the Earth, for example, yeah, it'd be a lot more glow. But in a short answer, no, luckily.
Okie dokie.
I read an article a while ago that it said if we would just do one thing, point all the outdoor lights down, it would make a big improvement.
Yes, a huge improvement. That photo I showed of that garage that had those wall packs, and then we put our hand in front of the image, those things are called wall packs. If you're ever at a hardware store and you're like, I want a light for my backyard, never get a wall pack. Those are the ones that literally just like goes like this, and the light shines this way, which means it's also shining that way, and everything. You want a light that's pointed down, and yes, you're right. Those things should be outlawed. In fact, there's someone at the IES, the Illuminating Engineering Society, who just wrote an editorial in our trade magazine that said they should be literally, they should be made illegal because they don't do what they're supposed to be doing, and they are the worst offenders. Yes, light should be pointed where it should be used. Yes.
Any other questions? Coming.
We need 2 microphones. A lot of questions. Thanks.
Pass it over you. There we go.
I have a comment and a question. My comment, I just came back from Bryce Canyon.
Oh.
Oh my gosh. Our son talked us into going up on this very steep trail at night, no lights anywhere. And I was absolutely terrified. And I mean, you couldn't see anything except the stars.
Was it clear? Was it a clear night? Was it a clear?
Oh, completely. Either there was no moon, we couldn't see, there was no moon, there was no clouds. It was, I've never seen anything like it. He kept saying, let your eyes adjust, let your eyes adjust. And for the first part of our walk, I couldn't do it. I kept on putting on my phone light because it was terrifying to walk and not be able to see where you're walking. But eventually, he was right. My eyes did accommodate, even though it was a moonless night. I was able to see enough to not trip, and it just, I don't know. It just was the most beautiful sight I've ever seen. The second question I have is, our neighbors, and you just see this all around, it's like a fad where people put these little, like Christmas lights, but they're not Christmas lights, just these little lights to decorate their patios, and they're on 24/7. How much does that affect things?
Those string lights are becoming very, very popular. Now, one thing I got to say, though, the thing about the string lights, think about why they look the way they do. You've probably seen them, right? You know, they look like little Edison bulbs. They look like old-fashioned light bulbs. They're actually LEDs, and they're also a very warm kind of orangish light, right? Because they have a certain charm to them. So what they're doing is they're trying to reproduce that feeling of what is. Think about if those were blue-white lights, you know? They'd be like, ugh, you wouldn't want them to be uncomfortable. So weirdly enough, they're trying to have a old-fashioned charm to them, which is like beautiful, warm, colored light. But yes, they're a little excessive. Now, yeah, I like I said, I'm not a Luxite. I'm not saying we shouldn't have any light. And I think they are for if you're outdoors and you're having, friends over and in the backyard, barbecuing or whatever, yeah, go for it. But turn them off when you're done. Once again, is it useful? Yeah. I want to go back to first of all, I have a couple questions. First, a comment about your Bryce experience. And I want everybody to have that same experience at some point in their lives, if you haven't already. Our eyes to dark adjust, to go from, for example, if right now we could seal this complete room off and then turn off all the lights and maybe have just one single one of these lights you could see by, but it would take about 15 minutes. From bright, using your cones to using your rods, it actually takes about 15 minutes to adjust. So that's why you were like, I can't see. Oh, yeah, soon as you have to have a little faith. In fact, the best thing to generally do in that case is like, okay, we're gonna take a night hike, just all sit around, everybody turn off the lights, talk, enjoy yourself for about 15 minutes, then take your hike, because that was gonna be the thing that made it possible. And like you said, literally starlight was enough to navigate by once you let your eyes do what they do best. And I was going to give one anecdote as well. Like I was up in Gila National Forest in New Mexico, camping up in about 10,000 feet, and all alone with my telescope and just a tent. And it was like, oh my God, this is beautiful night skies and everything. And then through the trees, I'm seeing this bright glaring light. I'm like, oh no, there's like people driving down the road. They're going to blow my night vision. And I was like, they're still over there. And I couldn't figure out what. And then eventually I was like, oh, Jupiter was rising between the trees. It was so bright, I thought it was headlights. And that's what happens when you really can see in the dark. Yeah.
We have one last question here, and then we're going to ask everyone to retire downstairs for tea and coffee and more questions.
You put up the slide that compared the lights of Austin to the lights of Oak Park. I guess my question is because, I mean, there's many reasons that Austin has more crime than Oak Park. And wouldn't, I guess, a better question to ask is, if you didn't put up all that lighting in Austin, rather than compare it to Oak Park, wouldn't it be more accurate to just compare it to, if you didn't put the lighting up, would crime be a lot worse in Austin?
That is a good question. Yeah, it's really hard to prove a negative, right? But in this case, we actually can. In 1999, when it comes to the correlation between light and crime, there are many studies. I have 50 years of studies from cities around, mainly the United States and some other countries, that tried to do experiments or tried to use one way or another to say, all right, if we have more light, is there less crime? If we have less light, more crime. Surprisingly enough, one of the most robust studies ever done was done in 1999 in Chicago. They took two neighborhoods, and then one was a control, one was, and they were generally about the same level of crime at the time. And what the question was, it was from the Department of Transportation. They wanted to know, hey, we have 95-watt high-pressure sodium lights in our alleys. What happens if we go to 200 watts? So, actually, it was 250 watts, I'm sorry. So 2.5 times brighter. So like, okay, well, let's do a study. So they actually did an in situ study as opposed to just, comparing before and after, for example. There could be a lot of outliers. And they did a 1-year study. And what they came out with was the places that they had 95 watts, here was like the crime level. Actually, I have this slide somewhere. Not in the slide deck, though. And then all index crimes increased when they did the 250 watts. Every single one. It wasn't huge, but it was definite. It was about a 5 to 8% increase. And the study was, like I said, it was the Department of Transportation and another Illinois agency, made it, supported it. And they asked why. And the executive summary said, our only guess is that, well, I'm going to put it in different words, is that criminals are not superhuman. They need to see too. Why would you think that if it was dark, that someone says, oh, I'm going to break into this garage? It's like they can't even see what's in it. So, and fundamentally, so they found that there was about an 8% increase in crime as if they almost tripled the light level. And so what was the decision Chicago made? They put in the brighter lights. Yep. So, but getting to really the point of your question, you're right. We don't have any evidence that brighter light decreases crime. It's very fuzzy in the studies. But we do have a lot of evidence, and it didn't get to the other question I was going to ask you about the fear of the dark. Whereas, like, what is the fear? And does this light address that fear? Because I think we react almost like an instinctual level to try to solve this problem, whereas it's much more of a societal solution needed, and maybe financial and things like. There's many other things. It's not just more light equals better.
Can you all help me thank Ken?